There we go.
There we go.
All right. Now I'm going to race to mute. I'm just looking also at the thumbnail for, okay, we are live. The thumbnail for this video, and I feel like it looks very springtimey. And this book, much of it, I feel like is not necessarily like light sunny weather.
Yeah.
So I'll give everybody a minute to get here, but just in the meanwhile, welcome everyone. And thank you if you're tuning in later. Thank you if you are here now. And I am excited. And we have a very special guest, Elizabeth. And I'm sorry, do you go, because your channel is Lizzie Faye, you know, loves books. So you go by Elizabeth?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. In real life, I go by Elizabeth, but I'll answer to Liz or Lizzie or whatever. And several years ago at work, somebody started calling me Lizzie Faye. It was, I think it was a girl from Alabama. And she said, "You mean you have a middle name of Faye and no one's ever called you Lizzie Faye before?" And it just kind of became my handle. And from the time I got my first computer and started on AOL.com, my email was Lizzie Faye and everything was just Lizzie Faye.
Gotcha. Well, welcome. We're so glad to have you. And
you.
If for some reason you haven't yet found Elizabeth's channel, I have it linked in the description. It should be to the live show. I have her channel tagged. Yeah. And Elizabeth, you just read, you are like one of the most voracious readers that I follow, and you have such a range that you read. And and do you want to just briefly tell people about, it's more Montgomery this month?
Montgomery Challenge. Yeah. And you know, that just kind of like came out of, it's something I'd kind of been thinking about for a long time. And then I heard Mitzi talking about wanting to read past Anne of Green Gables. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I've been wanting, you know, to try to encourage people to do. It's basically a reading challenge to introduce people to more Montgomery, you know, go outside the box of Anne and find other things. She's got a bunch of short story collections, and there's other series like duologies, and well, there's 2 duologies and one trilogy, and just lots of related things. And so we just decided to jump on it and do it this fall, and it's going great. So I'm rewatching everything, and it's really fun. I'm in the middle of the second Emily of New Moon book right now, and I knew all these things were great because I read them years ago, but it's real. I'm just being reminded how fantastic they are.
That's so exciting. I really want to, I think this winter, maybe try the Emily books. I was in a weird mood when I first tried them, and so I want to come back to them.
Well, there's an Emily TV show. There's 4 seasons of it, and I'm watching that right now. I'm in season 2. It's on Hoopla, for anybody that has access to Hoopla. And it is, I'm finding though that the show is a little darker than the books. She kind of has, in the books, they allude to her having kind of a little bit of second sight, but in the show, they really expand on that. But it's great. They're all great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not reading anything to do. I'm not, participating in reading because I'm just, this always happens in August and September with my reading mood. But I am thoroughly enjoying The Road to Avonlea. I'm in season 2 now. And yesterday we got to see the first episode with Davy and Dora. And it is outrageous how cute the kids are that play Davy and Dora. And I just loved at the end of the episode, Davy, he was looking at Rachel Lynn's tooth that she had like gotten pulled, and he accidentally swallows it.
Oh no.
And then he's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't think, do you think maybe it hit my conscience?" And then they all just lose it. So he's just as like, he's exactly how I picture him in the books.
Awesome.
And we have 3 people who have said hi: Cammie, Elizabeth, and Shelley. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So Angie may or may not be here later. Poor Angie. She is like, I feel like she has to like hit the ground running to get to the live shows after work. So maybe we could shift like a half hour later for the next.
Yeah, we could do that in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and Elizabeth says, "Oh, Davy, yes, he's quite the handful."
And did you say you're in season 2? I don't know if I've ever watched past season 1. When I first watched Road to Avonlea, I was getting them off in VHS from the library, and I think they only had season 1 on VHS. So I am planning to rewatch season 1, and I own seasons 1, 2, and 3 on DVD. So I'm going to be watching those during the challenge too.
Oh, very fun. Yeah, I don't know how. Also, I know some people, some Americans that I've messaged with on Instagram talked about watching it on Disney. Somehow I had Disney as a kid, but I never knew about that.
Yeah, and you can find a few of those on VHS too if you go to eBay. Disney renamed it Tales from Avonlea, and they released a few episodes, not that many, maybe half a dozen or so, maybe more, I don't know, but it's the same exact show, but it's called Tales from Avonlea, and it might have been on Disney Channel way back in the early days of Disney Channel.
Very interesting. Yeah, I was apprehensive going in because I know I've watched the Little Men TV show and I was not that impressed by it. So I was kind of like, I don't know, but I'm absolutely in love with it.
I think anything that Sullivan Entertainment does is fantastic. They're just great.
Yes.
But they did not do Emily of New Moon. It is done by Salter. And it has a totally different feel, but it's great.
Okay. Oh, cool. Well, I am looking forward to talking about Storm in the Village. So now when we read through the Mitford books, I feel like we definitely had like ones where we're like, yeah, I didn't get on with this one as much. And unfortunately, this was one of those. Now it was still very much a 3-star read. So I definitely was happy to be reading it. But I think 2 of the plot points are just plots that happen to not really captivate me. And so one is like nice girl dating the bad boy, and just not really listening to anyone's advice, which, I mean, it's rich coming from me to say that. Like, I never fell in love with someone that like everyone was like, they're so wrong for you. So I'm sure it's easy for me to say that, like, oh, she's so annoying and stubborn and she won't listen to them. But that's a reason why I struggle with the Tenant of Wildfell Hall, because it's like, it's all about her falling in love with the bad boy and not listening to the advice. But also it's happened like someone close to me, and I just feel like they had a very positive father figure, but they kept picking duds. And they finally ended up with someone nice. So I'm grateful for that. But the other one was the like kind of whether they will build this housing estate, which obviously I know I would be very invested if I was living in the beautiful countryside and if I was one of the people who had a business there, and especially if I was a teacher and things were going to be affected. So I think for some reason, just for those to be kind of the 2 dominating plots, maybe that's what it was. But I did really appreciate everything about Miss Clare. I find her a really interesting character, and that's why I'm so excited that the next book is going to be a lot about her. And then even it'll get us closer to the Victorian era, which is always a fun setting. I don't think it'll quite be there, but it's so funny because though we've spoken about because of kind of like the lack of technology and stuff, this does almost feel like Victorian era at some points. So yeah, I really enjoyed the parts with Miss Clare. And then just getting one more negative thing out of the way, I think I find it a little bit jarring how part of it is Miss Reed narrating first person, and it will be literally like the next paragraph is going into you're omniscient and you're finding out things that Miss Reed wouldn't necessarily know. So I think I kind of feel it was more streamlined if there was like a chapter of Miss Reed narrating and then a chapter kind of giving you the bigger scope for the events. I really like the vicar. I thought I loved his whole dilemma, and this was such a like bookish dilemma, like, oh, can I give myself that treat with that book? I really want that book. And it just makes me, I feel very spoiled by like public libraries. Because most things, I'm able to find, and also used books are so accessible online now. We're just very spoiled for choice. Yeah, Elizabeth says she thought that the transitioning between the two kind of tenses was awkward. But those are kind of my general thoughts on this. So I'm excited to hear what everybody else thought. So I guess, Rainey, what did you think of Storm in the Village?
Well, actually, I'm exactly the opposite. I felt more invested in this one than I did in the first two. But I think I would say that I am much more of a plot-driven reader, and so like anytime Kate and I discuss books, it's like if it's really character-driven, she's like, "Yay!" and I'm like, but I mean, I do enjoy like all the character stuff too, but and I do really enjoy Miss Claire, and I think I'm going to be really upset when and if something happens to her, because I know it's coming. It's like the whole Barnabas thing. I know it's coming.
And also Miss is it Sadie? Now I'm like,
oh yes, Miss Sadie. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like,
yeah,
that was rough.
that was rougher than Barnabas, actually. I was only because they just kind of glossed over Barnabas, and Sadie was like half the book.
Yes.
So,
Well, and she's a person.
well, true. But if we're gonna be honest here, I cry more when dogs die than I do when people die. Unless it's a child. But yeah. So, but I don't know. I liked the whole, and maybe again, this is because I kind of had a Miss Jackson experience, sort of. I mean, not well, initially everyone was like, he's such a nice boy, you should date him. And then my parents, on the other hand, were like, he doesn't have a good job, why does he still live with his parents? But he's nice, he treats me well. And then things didn't end well, but so I probably should have listened to them. But yeah, so like, I don't know, it just doesn't, I kind of get it. Like, I get how you would be like defensive about it, because it's like what you want, and like everyone else around you, especially the other like older single people, and they're like, you shouldn't be with him, and like, what do you know about it? Kind of a thing. So I mean, I did like that plot point, even though it is overdone, obviously, but I did think it was weird though that, I mean, I don't know how old she's supposed to be, but like, she's an adult, I would assume, and all of a sudden her dad just comes and like, you're coming home with us, and and like, and Miss Reed is like, I'm gonna tell your parents on you. She's an adult.
Although maybe it feels a little bit different because that was her first time being out of the house.
Yeah.
Like, I think it would be like bringing a college student home, kind of.
Right. Probably. Yeah. And she probably was like in her early 20s. I just never really figured that out. And it did say multiple times that like Miss Reed was kind of responsible for her. So it would kind of be like having your RA tell your parents that you were smoking in the dorm room or something.
Yes.
But and then I kind of liked the whole like expansion of the village thing, although it kind of got a little tedious, I thought, just with all the back and forth, and the ending where they were having the big meeting, and they found out what the council decided. That was kind of exciting, because I was like, oh yay, they're not gonna do this. But then part of me was like, how can they just like take this guy's property. And that I didn't get. I was like, I understand if he will sell it to you, but how can you just be like, so sorry, dude, we're taking your property from you?
Yeah.
So,
States?
what's that?
Does that not happen in the States? The government can't take your land? if they
Actually, the government, because I know this because of my family that lives in Myrtle Beach. I think there's certain circumstances they can work at where they can just take your property.
Like, I know if they want to like build a road or something in
Yeah.
Canada, because they pay you a fair market value, they can basically
If they pay you, I guess they can, yeah. But they can't just be like, you got to move, you're done. Yeah, they got to make it worth your while, I guess.
Yeah, it's called eminent domain, I think.
Yes.
Oh,
where
yes.
They can do it, but they do have to pay for it.
Yeah. No. And I feel like it's not.
Yeah, it's kind of crummy.
Yeah, and it's not common. I wouldn't. I
Yeah.
don't think
It's a
around
big
here.
deal when it does happen.
Yeah.
It does happen.
Yeah. So,
Especially if you don't want it to happen.
right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I thought as a plot driven reader, I kind of got on with this one more. And then like the whole Joseph Cogg's storyline,
Oh.
that was really sad. I kind of thought a little bit that reminded me of Mitford, with why did his name just escape me?
Dooley.
Yes. I don't know what I was going to call him, but it wasn't Dooley. I think because we were talking about Davy earlier, I was like, Davy?
Mm.
No, not Davy. But that would also apply.
Yes, it
So,
would.
yeah. So, yeah, it just seemed, this one to me seemed a little bit more Mitford-esque than the other two.
I totally see that.
Yeah.
And I think it just so happened that, the plot points that she picked to feature didn't interest me, but I think if she, if there are more plot driven ones in the future, it might happen to be kind of plot points that interest me. So hopefully
Yeah.
I'll be okay with the more plot driven ones.
I think she has a good mix though. So like,
Yes.
and Mitford did too. I think that's why like we could all enjoy it, because there was a lot of character analysis, but there was also enough
Totally.
different plots to drive it along too. So
Yes.
hopefully that's the way this one will be.
Yes. Alrighty. And then Chelsea, what about you?
I also enjoyed this one. It wasn't like my favorite book of all time, but I quite enjoyed it when I got into it. I didn't find it gripping. Like I wasn't being like, oh my goodness, I have to get back to reading. But it also has been like, I have some family stuff going on. And then with the Queen passing away, it's just been like a bad couple weeks of reading. So I feel like I haven't been in the mood to pick up books. But once I would pick it up and get into it, I would really enjoy it. And I did enjoy that it was a little bit more focused on the adults in the village than so much of the school children drama. So I like that aspect.
Yeah.
It was funny, when I checked the publication date on this, I did realize, because I was thinking about the Queen, that this book would have been published when the Queen was already Queen. And it's like a classic, like old book to us. Like, oh, yeah. Like, yeah, if they ever mention the Queen in the book, that's what they'll be. I read online that in her Thrush Green book, she talks about the coronation.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I definitely went into it thinking it was going to be like a physical storm. Like I thought there was going to be some sort of like flooding or some escapade. And then to find out that it's more about like these emotional storms, kind of like relationship storms in the village. So that was interesting. And I really liked the way she kind of used weather as a symbolism of that throughout the book. So like, for example, when Joseph Hoggs runs away, for example, like we had that big rainstorm. And then when the people are worried about the town possibly being developed, it's like wintertime. And then as soon as they get the news that it's not, this starts thawing out and the spring flowers and stuff all appear. So I really thought that was since all of her books seem to kind of cover like a year or so, it was fun for her to match the seasons up kind of with the plot points to have that symbolism with what was happening with the weather and what was happening in the plots. So I liked that. The plot line with Miss Crab and Miss Jackson kind of reminded me of The Odd Women, which is like a book that,
Oh yeah.
The George Gissing book.
yeah, it's a book that when I read it, I hadn't really heard of it much. I think there was like a read along with Katie, I think. And I read it for that. And then it's like shocking how many books I've read since where I'm like, man, that kind of reminds me of like different elements from The Odd Woman. But like Miss Crab had such a reaction to her dating when she didn't even know the backstory of the guy. Like she wasn't from the village. All the villagers were kind of like, oh no, he's trouble. You probably shouldn't be involved with him. We don't think it's like a good match. But like Miss Crab just freaked out and totally reminded, I can't remember the character's name in The Odd Woman, who was just like very against marriage and relationships and stuff. But I don't know, it kind of reminded me of the plot of The Odd Woman. So
That's interesting. I didn't think about that before, but yeah, I would say that too.
yeah, like there was a couple, and then obviously Miss Jackson kind of matched up with the character in The Odd Woman that made the bad marriage. But Miss Jackson was saved by Miss Reed and her bicycle adventure.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any like tragic, fallen women plot lines in Miss Reed.
Yeah.
Oh, and Elizabeth.
No one died of consumption, so that's good.
Elizabeth Brink says, "I'm glad I wasn't at Hillary's parents at the beach house for that month. That would not have been fun." And then she says she's planning on reading The Odd Women in Victober.
Read it.
Yes, I haven't read it.
It was very good.
At some point, I want to read George Gissing. She says, Miss Crab is quite a character. She would drive me nuts in real life. Yeah, she leapt off the page. It was super fun, but she's very intense. Any other thoughts, Chelsea?
Oh, that's the bulk of them. Yeah.
Alrighty, and that leaves Elizabeth.
Okay, well, it's interesting because y'all are bringing up all these points that I never thought about, and I never even would dream of giving anything by Miss Reed a 3-star rating because I think I've rated everything 5 stars. But I'm not hard to please as far as that goes. If you have an idyllic setting and quirky characters, I'm gonna probably rate it 5 stars. But I felt like, okay, well, first of all, the 2 plot lines, I thought they didn't really matter to me one way or the other, but they were a good venue for bringing up all these fun happenings and good storylines, like offshoots of storylines. Like, for instance, Miss Claire, the whole storyline of how bringing Miss Jackson into her home helped rejuvenate her, but then Miss Jackson kind of going off the rails brought her back down. And then there was like a whole thing with the doctor, which I had to look up. Do you remember the Kipling reference that he made when he was talking to the Mons about, well, let's just say this, this, and this. And they're like, oh, you wouldn't be so wicked. And and he's like, and he says, I think I marked it. Let me see. He quotes this quote and says, remember your Kipling. And I'm like, I barely started Jungle Book. I don't remember any Kipling. But I looked it up, and I'm kind of getting off track here, and I don't know if I can go.
No, I find it interesting.
But yeah, I Googled just the first line, not a little place at Tooting. And that's actually he started in mid-verse. And it basically, the section of the poem that I saw, that I read, is just basically saying this is a whopper. This is a, not just a little lie. This is, this is a big deal, kind of a thing. Wow. And so it was interesting to look that up. But the other thing that I noticed about this that I didn't feel in the first few books, what is this, the 3rd book or the 4th one now? This is the 3rd, right? So in the first 2 books, I felt like, I kind of wondered what Miss Reed, the author, Dora Saint, was going through in her life when she was writing this, because Miss Reed, the character, seemed a little more testy, a little more on edge with her companions in this book. And maybe it's because it, like Chelsea, it was Chelsea that said this was more adult conversation than dealing with the kids. So I tagged two places. One where she was talking to Mrs. Annette, and let me see. Find it here. Oh shoot, I have the thing marked, but where on the page is it? She just like made she used the A word, you know, the for donkey, and
Yeah.
and I was like, whoa, do you remember that?
Yes.
Yes, I was actually just going to say that about like Miss Reed swore in this one.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the Bible, but you know, still, where, shoot, I'm trying to find the line.
You're never gonna find me judging.
Yeah. Anyway, but she was, you know, she said that in that conversation, it was like addle-pated, you know, she was saying to Mrs. Annette for saying something. And I was just like, whoa, you know, and I kept rereading it thinking, okay, she didn't like chuckle after or anything. No, she really said it like seriously. It wasn't, you know, by any indication said in a joking manner. So I was like, okay. And then there was another time, let's see, and that reference was in like chapter 5, the one that's called Rumors Fly. And then again, I think I have it here. My book is small print. Have any of y'all ever seen these Penguin editions? This is the only one I have in a Penguin edition, and I didn't like it at first, but it's got some extra features that I do like. But this apparently came from the UK. There's not even a US price on it. It's UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. So anyway, but it's very small print. Oh, no, this is not the same thing, but this made me laugh. When she was serving tea to Miss Crabbe and Miss Jackson, and they're having this big, you know, psychological discussion about how to handle children. And then they finally, you know, recognize her, her being there. And they're like, oh, you know, what would you do? And she said, smack.
Yes.
Just, you know, smack.
Off the cuff.
Yeah. So that was pretty funny. So anyway, yes, just overall, Miss Reed seemed a little testier in this, but it, you know, it could be because she was speaking to adults and not to children for the most part. So
that's interesting to think about.
Yeah. And I forget which one of y'all brought up the whole thing with Miss Crabbe, not Miss Crabbe, Miss Jackson being an adult and yet Miss Reed calling her father. I know a situation from my childhood where I know that this happened. The person was an adult already teaching school and started behaving similar to this. And the father called the young man and said, you straighten this out or I'm coming up there. And it wasn't very long before they were married. So
well, that's good.
You know, and that was in the 70s. So
yeah.
He called him and mentioned his yeah. And he mentioned his giant shotgun collection.
Yeah.
Elizabeth says, and when Miss Reed keeps having to repeat black or white to Miss Crabbe and saying it louder and louder. Yeah. I was so annoyed on Miss Reed's behalf. Like, you know, she's being a hostess and she's trying to ask you how you would like your drink. Just answer her. It's not hard.
Yeah. And on the other hand, though, Miss Reed could have just stood back politely and not said anything.
That is
but
true.
I think it was just the humor in that, you know, because Miss Reed is one of those people that is not going to be stepped over. You know, she's going to make sure that she is in control of the situation.
Yes.
So, go ahead.
Oh, well, it makes me think of, I had a friend who worked in a deli, and it really annoyed her when she would greet a customer if they came in and they'd be looking and she'd say, hi, how are you doing? And they wouldn't acknowledge her. And so then she would take it as a challenge and keep can I help you with anything? And just asking like polite inquiries until they would acknowledge her presence.
My mom just did that not too long ago. And thankfully I wasn't here wasn't there because I would have been mortified. But she and my dad went into a store and there were just like two teenagers behind the counter on their phones, and didn't acknowledge her. And that irritates my mom. So she real loudly, hello. And then they both kind of looked up, and the guy didn't, just looked up and then went right back to his phone. And then the girl, I guess, started making more of an effort, but it was still subpar to my mom. At that point, my mom was just angry and she wasn't gonna give in.
So funny, digging her heels in.
Yeah. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm glad I wasn't there.
And then in regards to the other plot line, I didn't feel like the whole fact that it was painted by a painter really wasn't enough of an argument. I could understand it, it being land you want to preserve it, and you don't want a lot of people moving in and all of that, because we kind of deal with that in my area of Central Florida. But the fact that it's been painted by a painter, okay, so it's preserved in a painting.
Right.
So you don't need to keep it for that reason because it's already been painted.
I could see if it had some historical significance, like it was a battlefield of Gettysburg or something like that.
Yeah.
But
For sure.
At the beginning of chapter 5, when it says news of Mr. Miller's letter from the Atomic Energy Authority spread rapidly, people shopping in Caxley High Street shook their heads over the affair, and the folk of Fairacre and Beach Green, between whose two villages the new housing estate would be, dropped their everyday discussion of births unduly premature, marriages not before time, and deaths always wholeheartedly regretted, and turned to this more meaty fare. It really makes me think of in Cranford when they hear the railway is coming.
oh my.
Which I will say the railway coming would be a lot more kind of traumatic. Because it's this new technology that's never been around before, speeding past people. Before people rode in trains, they kind of thought you might die just going that fast. So that is, I think the hysteria in that is a bit more reasonable. And then I just love how she paints the scene. I sauntered through the village, swinging my basket as St. Patrick's clock struck 11 o'clock. Time to bring them in from play, warned my teacher shadow, and rats to that, chortled my exuberant holiday self. What bliss it was to be at large in Fairacre on a Friday morning, instead of cooped up in a dark school. It was fun to see the difference in the village at this time of the morning. The sun slanted from a different angle, winking on the brass knocker of Mr. Lamb's door, a beautiful lion's head with a ring in its mouth, which I had not noticed before when the sun had slipped further round. In a cottage window stood a cactus plant, which I had not noticed before, but now, with the sun shining full upon it, two vivid orange flowers gaped like young birds' beaks in its warm benison. And then just going on to describe so much of the, the little minutia happening in it.
Yeah,
Debbie's
she's
house-
definitely got a flair for writing. I mean, the descriptive writing is great. What did you guys think about now that Mrs. Mon is in the picture? Like there was that one scene where they were at the meeting and someone had saved Miss Reed a seat by Mr. Mon, and then Mrs. Mon was on the other side, and it was like a little bit uncomfortable, because you remember how everybody thought he was single when he first showed up in town, and they were all trying to match her up with him. And then all of a sudden the wife shows up, and so it was, and I forget now, but he then at another point he was trying to draw her out, like to kind of make his wife jealous, and she wasn't having no part of that. She's like, no, and and got out of there quick. That was
Yeah, she
interesting.
was feisty in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, even with him.
I like the part where she like finally works up to offer Miss Claire her guest room or to offer Miss
Yeah.
Crab.
Yes.
Miss
Miss
Crab.
And like, but like she really doesn't want to because she likes living alone. And then once she actually says it, she's like, I could almost like hear the brush of my guardian angel's pen as he wrote down my single good deed or something.
Yeah.
That was great. I
Oh.
love that.
I like that
Like-
too. And you know what it makes me think of in Betsy's wedding when Joe's aunt is going to have to move far away, or Joe says,
yes.
you know, can she move in with us? And I really love like Betsy has this major inner struggle. Like, and I really sympathize with her because they're newlyweds. This is this precious
Yeah.
time. And then she goes off to church and she prays really hard about it. And then she's just kind of okay with it. So I think kind of just being willing to surrender, like, even when it's really hard, but then it's so great because she's like, phew, you know, Miss Claire, I would have done it, but she didn't have to move in with me. So it's all good. Debbie Faust asked, was Dan Crockford a real person? And then Elizabeth says she's Googled and she doesn't see anything that popped up. And then Shelley says it was funny that Miss Crab referred to Miss Reed's book choices on the nightstand as juvenilia, and Miss Reed thought she was dismissing her darlings. That is kind of just belittling someone's interests. That's a big no-no with me.
Yeah.
Um,
And I love
Okay.
the descriptions of how Miss Crab would continue to talk and on and on and on and eat at the same time. You know, you could just picture it.
yes. And then
Oh,
just
man.
that, I just love that bit with the vicar and the book token. And I looked up the poet, the Parson poet, George Herbert, and this one that it's kind of a devotional type poem. And it says he was poetryfoundation.org says he was a contemporary of Shakespeare and Milton. And so this short poem is called The Altar. It says, a broken altar, Lord, thy servant rears, made of a heart and cemented with tears, whose parts are as thy hand did frame. No workman's tool hath touched the same. A heart alone is such a stone as nothing but thy power doth cut. Wherefore each part of my hard heart meets in this frame to praise thy name. That if I chance to hold my peace, these stones to praise thee may not cease. Oh, let thy blessed sacrifice be mine and sanctify this altar to be thine. I think that's so beautiful. And just this image of your life being a living sacrifice and, you know, of my hard heart meets in this frame, not acting like it's easy to do that, kind of carrying your cross daily. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. So I thought that was fun for her to reference a real poet that he would have liked. I am looking forward to seeing more of him. I just thought he was fun. And he had a funny remark towards the end about when they find out the news that it's not going to happen. I can't remember what exactly he said, though. I didn't highlight it.
I didn't. I was letting talk to text read it to me by the end because I was like, okay, I gotta get this done.
Well, I had read it a few years ago, but I reread most of it. I still had like 60 pages left, which I skimmed in the last hour before we came on live, just trying to like remember how it ended.
Whatever works.
Oh, no, I was thinking as we were talking, I remembered that I really picked up on, as the single girl, how she would point out all of the like bad things about marriage. And I mean, like, they're realistic, but you know, like just saying like, just kind of like encouraging herself to continue to be single. And then her friend Amy just like pities her all the time. And they just have
and Amy's husband has cheated on her. So I don't know why she keeps trying to hammer this in.
Yeah.
It's just one of those.
Well, maybe it's a defense mechanism. Maybe because he cheated on her, then she wants that. And I don't know how many of you have watched As Time Goes By, but it makes me think of, you know, Judi Dench, her character Jean. Her sister-in-law always refers to her as poor Jean. And it's so like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, poor Jean. And she'll say, what do you mean, poor Jean? Like she finally like says it a couple times. And it's just this superior thing, like, oh, poor Jean. And that's what
Yeah.
Amy makes me feel like.
Mm.
Yeah.
I feel bad,
Yeah.
a little bad for Amy though, because like it's clear that I don't know if she doesn't want to know that it's still happening. Like there's that one snarky comment at the end where she's like, Amy was showing me the new bag her husband had bought her after his like unspoken about work trip to an undisclosed location or something. And you're like, oh, he's a
Oh,
loser.
Amy. Get
I
out of
think
there.
she believes that it's still better to be married, even in her situation,
Yeah.
than to be single like
Mm.
Miss Reed, or at least she's trying to convince herself of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And it seems like,
No.
maybe I'm wrong, but Miss Reed doesn't seem terribly lonely.
Mm.
I think
No.
she feels pretty busy with work, and that's where she, the human connection that she has plenty of that at work. And then like we observed, she was like bracing herself, if Miss Claire needs to live with me, then she does, but she was relieved to have her place to herself again.
Mhm.
So if she was lonely, I'd feel more like, yeah, Amy's right, maybe she does need someone, but I think she's okay.
It
I had
makes
a
me
friend
curious-
once. So, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say it makes me curious to look up like when, like, was Miss Reed still single when she wrote this, or had she already?
Ah.
When did she get married versus when she wrote it, and was her marriage bad or?
And did she have a nagging friend?
Yes.
Frenemy. Oh, Elizabeth says Miss Reed was snarky about Amy's husband too.
Mhm.
Yeah, Amy liked the marriage benefits because it was, aside from being a teacher, like your career options as a woman would be a lot more limited. They were starting to open up more. But and I'm sure there was, a stigma against it. And yeah. Shelley says, doesn't she say she was as fulfilled as a woman could want? I did not remember that quote, Shelley. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and also I think a couple people that I've known that they were really content being single, genuinely content, and then they just met the right person. And so
It'll happen when you least expect it.
no,
I just love that phrase.
but I'm saying I think a couple of people I know, they genuinely like they weren't interested in getting
I
married
know.
until, and they're like they enjoyed their alone time and everything, and they had to meet somebody they were willing to give up that alone time for.
Right.
And I think Miss Reed is like, nope, slim pickings out here in Fairacre.
I have had so many people say that phrase to me in my lifetime, and I have to like physically keep my eyes from rolling in front of them.
You're like, yeah, just like death.
Yeah, it does happen when you least expect it. Yep. Just like this punch in the face.
Okay, I feel so oblivious. Shelley referenced Mr. Mon, and then Elizabeth did too. Jog my memory on Mr. Mon. Why am I?
That's the guy that they tried to set her up with last book, and then he had the wife. He's like really into birds,
I see. Okay.
and the wife, the one Elizabeth was saying, was kind of being like unnecessarily antagonistic towards Miss Claire, and Miss Claire like never had any.
Not Miss Claire, Miss Reed.
Miss Reed, yeah, sorry, Miss Reed never interest in him, so it's like you don't have to freak out, lady. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
never the villagers. I guess she probably came in and heard all this gossip, but it's like it was never even a wisp of a thing. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm
I
sure
mean-
none of the villagers that she heard that gossip from would say that it never was anything.
Yeah.
Like they would make it as dramatic as possible. So
Totally.
I think they did go on one outing, like maybe some kind of birding thing, because when he was trying to be, kind of antagonistic to his wife and suggest that they do something, he's like, "Isn't that right? Miss Reed, a good whatever type of outing would be great." And that's when she's like, "No, I'm out of this. I'm
Yes.
not having any part of that."
he came on the school trip to the beach,
That okay.
Like it wasn't even like a private outing. It was like her.
Yes. He was a chaperone.
Chaperone. That's it. That's it.
And Debbie says, though, that she met her husband at a parent-teacher conference.
Okay.
I also think my aunt met her husband at a parent-teacher conference. She was the teacher. He was the parent.
That's so funny. The single
I'm
dad.
pretty sure.
My
And they're
great
perfect for each other.
her husband at a parent-teacher conference.
Who did?
Apparently that's the place to meet.
He was like a widower with 2 kids, and she
Oh
was
my
the
goodness.
teacher in the one-room schoolhouse in the prairies.
Wow. Well, any other thoughts before we sign off?
I don't know if you guys noticed, but I did a little tiny misread book haul today.
I just watched it.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I was reading this yesterday. I was at book club and I had this with me, and the Friends of the Library president is in our book club. And I was like, hey, do you ever see any books by this author? And she's like, I think we might have some right now. So we went back to the friends room after book club and I got 10 misread books. I haven't even like compared them with what I already have. I'm sure that I already have some of them, but yeah, I just did a little book haul video today and also, you know, helped to promote this tonight and all of that. So, and I showed the rest of my collection. I didn't like take them off the shelf. I just showed a little shot of all my misread books that I have.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, that was a good find.
And
Yeah,
Debbie says
most of them were Thrush Green books though, which I don't like Thrush Green as much as Fairacre. Fairacre is really where my heart is. I think because all my family are teachers and I just love that whole school aspect.
yes.
Yeah.
Debbie says that her husband was the teacher and she was the parent of the boy who hated school. Oh my goodness. So, and also she wanted us to, she said, I don't know if you talked about this, but the flower show. And she said, I enjoyed reading about the infants' participation in the show. We did forget to talk about the flower show.
Yeah,
I thought that was a really fun section.
Yeah. I do like how Miss Jackson, it was Miss Jackson that was letting them cut out the flowers, and she was just like with reckless abandon because she was just like
all the waste.
Yeah, but I was like, good for you. Like, just let them be kids.
That's what I thought too. It's like,
yeah,
they're all happy.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about Mrs. Pringle this time. She's like one of my all-time favorite characters ever. I love her so much.
She bugged me a lot less in this one.
Yeah.
But she's the kind of character you love to hate, and you just want to see what in the world is going to come out of her mouth next.
Yes.
She is definitely the Emma character in this.
Yes.
Yeah. And she's got her own book coming up too.
Does she?
In the series, there's one called Mrs. Pringle. Yeah.
I'm
very excited.
So interesting.
Yeah.
I would be curious to know her backstory and kind of what made her the way she is.
Yeah. And speaking of other stories, I know, is it next month that's Miss Claire Remembers?
Or
so
in
that
November.
is like her childhood, and you're gonna meet her best friend like when she was younger, and I can't remember if they were college mates or what, but Emily Davis is Miss Claire's childhood friend or young friend, and there's a book later in the series called Emily Davis. So once we meet Emily Davis in Miss Claire Remembers, then later she'll have her book as well.
That's exciting.
That's so cool.
And another fun fact, Village Christmas is pretty short. I know you read it in December. It has nothing to do, I don't even think Miss Reed is in it. It takes place in Fairacre, but it's doesn't have to be read as part of the series. It's its own story.
That's what my experience with her Thrush Green Christmas ones were. They were felt very like you could just jump in with them. Yeah, we're gonna do the one before Village Christmas and Village Christmas in December. We're packing like
okay.
Because we're taking a Victober hiatus, and then we'll do Miss Claire's book. And then
I kind of forgot we were taking a Victober hiatus, and I'm like, how am I gonna read all my Victober reads and all this other stuff? I was like, oh,
Yeah,
good.
because I've noticed, Kate, that for you, everything else stops for
Yes.
October. Everything.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm like, I will miss reading October, but I'm like, I have several domestic things that I'm reading, and
Yeah.
hopefully will scratch that itch. Kelly says, I just wanted to mention how good her descriptions were. When Joseph Coggs felt starved and freezing, my heart was breaking.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I did sounds so random, but I'm trying like pretty much everything under the sun to help my acid reflux. And so last week I did a 2-day fast. Oh my gracious. I was like, I cannot imagine what it is like to feel this way all the time. I couldn't think about anything else except food. I like, yeah, just like all the supplements and everything, nothing, like that has helped. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe it would like reset everything. Yeah, so that was not fun. I was very, very glad to be done with it.
Oh gosh.
Oh, and Debbie about Miss Pringle says her leg was still conveniently hurting in the book.
Yes. Every time they had an argument.
So funny.
Walked away limping.
I enjoyed the little bit about the feather bed, and I thought Miss Pringle, that was neat that she actually like enjoyed doing that work and getting that done. And I was wondering, have any of you all ever slept on a feather bed? Do you even know?
I've
what
only
that's
had
like?
feather pillows, and they annoy me.
No, a feather bed is amazing. I still have one. It's in storage right now because I don't have I have an iron bedstead that was my grandmother's and a feather bed. But when I was a kid, I got to sleep on a feather bed, and it is amazing. It is just this huge bag of ticking, like stuffed with feathers.
Wow.
And I mean, the whole John Denver song is exactly what it's like. It is the coolest thing ever. And after you've slept on it all night, it flattens out and you have to fluff it back up. But like when I would be sleeping on it, I didn't always sleep on it like on and off throughout my life, but my mom would come in and help me fluff it up, and it would just be this big high thing, and I would just jump right in the middle of it. It is awesome.
So fun.
So I love that whole bit about the feather bed.
Chelsea, I was thinking of with Miss Pringle's leg, how it's like, oh wow, it's hurting right now. Do you remember the Faulty Towers episode where there's the woman who, whenever he wants to talk about her bill, she can't hear?
Yeah.
So infuriating. When there's something she's not happy about with room service, she comes and has a direct conversation. But when he wants to talk about the bill, and she's so, it's like, I just wish I could have like reached into the TV and smacked her. It's just so like, you are paying for services rendered. This is not rocket science. Elizabeth says about the feather bed that sounds so fun, and how they're trying to stop the feathers from floating away.
Yeah. And then once it's all put away, then she makes a reference to her dusted or her feathered garden. Like, because there's still the little feathers everywhere. I'm sure that's true.
There's actually a Victorian parlor game, and I did this with friends at a Christmas party where you all try to keep a feather up in the air and you all blow it, and you look ridiculous, but it's so much fun, and you're all laughing because it just looks so outrageous, all these grown-ups blowing a feather up in the air together. Well, I think we covered pretty much everything. And thank you, Elizabeth, for being a guest co-host. If you're willing, we would love to have you back another time.
I would love to, but don't feel like you have to ask me. I won't be expecting it, but thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it. I've loved it.
Awesome.
Okay.
And thank you everyone for watching. It's always so fun to discuss these very life-softening books together. So we will be back in November.